start.
Welcome to the next installment of Project Boost
Mm-hmm.
by
The
Deckmaker Productions. That's right.
Uh-huh.
And we're going to do another
Some more stuff.
portion of the teardown.
Yeah.
We're this close from getting started to the actual install for the supercharger.
So all we have, we get the supercharger in a week,
Yeah,
and then
next week,
So everything will be ready by next week. So that's good.
at least for the supercharger.
Yeah.
That's the goal. But what I wanted to at least do a little intro here to the next portion is tell you a little bit more about some of the trouble that some people have in getting the heater hoses off of.
This is fine.
Yeah, of the heater core and the firewall.
Yeah.
And just give you a little bit of an idea what kind of prep we're going to have to do to the block in order to allow the intake manifold to fit. So I'm excited about showing you what we have to do. Hopefully what I have to share will help you. And let's get down to business.
Yeah.
Rock and roll. First, let's talk heater hoses, specifically the ones that are attached to the heater core. There is a 3/4 and a 5/8 one, and these have some special fittings on there that can be a real bear to get off. But I will say I was pleasantly surprised, and the technique that I used, they came right off, which I thought, hey, I need to buy a lottery ticket, right? So this is what we're talking about. These two hoses that run to the heater core, okay? Now, I've already loosened them and taken them off, but I'll show you what we did here. Okay, so the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is just gently wiggle these back and forth. And there are two windows in this connector that you can depress simultaneously, gently push in, and then pull out. Mind you, you cannot pull too hard on these, because if you jack up these lines to your heater core or break it and it starts leaking, yeah, that's not good, because then you're gonna have to tear the whole dash apart just to replace the heater core. So be mindful when you're wrenching away at this stuff. The two windows I was showing you are they're 180 degrees from each other here. And what happens if Bacon can pan in here, if you can see this attachment here, these are 180 degrees. Those are what are pressed in. So when you press through these windows, you're depressing those, which is going to release the tension and allow you to remove it. However, that's very difficult to do. And I don't know, can you come in here and show? Either one of these is the same angle. There you go. So instead of pushing in here, what I did is with the hose on here, I reached past the edge, mind you, when it's on there, and I pressed down at the very end. Can you show them that? The very end here. So on both sides, I squeezed that instead of using the window through here, right? Now mind you, these are just turned for demonstration purposes. I squeezed that, pushed in gently, and these things lifted right off. I was amazed. It was so cool. All right, so that being said, as far as the supercharger goes, we have to reroute the plumbing here, okay? Even though we have a supercharger, we still need to have a heater. So what's gonna happen is we have to cut into this foil, if you will, and remove this factory tubing, and then I'm gonna reconnect, pan over to those two. The appropriate size tubing, one is gonna connect down here to the water pump, I presume. I think that's the water pump. And then another one is gonna be drawn out to lay along the valley here of the block, and with enough room to come out, and that's gonna attach to the front portion of the intake manifold we'll install. Okay, so we're gonna do that next. Now, before we stop, one more thing, a couple more things. The cylinder temp sensor here, we're gonna unplug this, and then we're going to remove it, and that's gonna be reused into the intake manifold we're installing. These are the knock sensors, okay? The knock sensors, these bolts are actually sit up too high. And we're gonna have to grind about 50% of the head of these off, leave just enough of these 6 sides so that if in the event we have to remove these in the future, we can still get a socket on there. So I'll take a black marker and go around the edges there, and that'll be my guide as I get my Dremel out and I grind these down. Then, let me get my pen here. This is the hot rod and stuff you have to do to make this stuff fit, okay? You're gonna have to show the light too. All right, so I made some marks here. The intake manifold with the intercooler is going to sit in this valley, and this portion, which is actually the cylinder head, is going to get in the way. So I'm going to have to take a Dremel tool and grind or cut, if you will, this out. Last thing to note is that you have to be very, very careful in making sure none of the metal filings and anything from the grinding is going to get into either the intake manifold, the intake ports, which are in the cylinder heads, or anywhere else in here. So be very, very careful. Make certain that you cover everything well. I'm actually going to go overboard and lay a bunch of shirts and towels and rags and everything I possibly can in here to prevent it. And obviously, whenever you're working with those power tools and grinders, make sure that you use eye protection. And with that aluminum grinding and stuff, it'd be a good idea to put a decent mask on. But yeah, so that's what we're going to try and get done here on this next stall and this next bit. And when we're done with that, we'll be back. Hey, check this out.
What?
So the last one I got off, I hacked it up. It was a bear. It took a long time, right? So I said, hey, how about a Dremel? As long as when you're cutting through it, you don't get too deep, because if you get too deep, you're gonna mess up this fitting and then you're hosed. But I think this saved a bunch of time. Sweet. Bacon. What'd we forget?
The oil leak. Or...
I figured this suspense was killing you. What's a little bit more, right? So, the oil leak that we showed you on the last video. I made a few calls, took a few pictures, and got some second opinions, if you will. And given the low mileage of the car and the oil that we're seeing isn't really wet, at this point, I think we're just gonna roll with it. And at some point, if it gets to be really bad, then we'll deal with it then. That might be a good reason to switch over to an 8-rib pulley system, which I was probably going to end up doing anyway, but not necessarily in the plan this go around. So, in case you were wondering, or
That's what's
perhaps
happening.
losing any sleep, now everything will be fine. Rest assured. Close those eyes. Get yourself tucked in. Get a good night's sleep. Everything will be all right. Roger?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, that's it. This is the Dead Maker Gang signing off. Goodbye.